Good morning. Welcome back to my docuseries on how fathers can win their custody case. I am Father X. Let's get to it. If you've already heard that you have to be respectful in family court because the judge is an authority to be respected, be aware that's 100% the wrong reason. Respect is something earned and not something that any person can demand. So in terms of how to behave in court, for your case, you want to act presidential. It's part of your offensive strategy to get an outcome in the best interests of your child. And I'm going to share a real example of how I broke down the court's gender bias by being nice. It was a turning point in the trial process, and there are tactical lessons you can learn from it. Look at the interpersonal dynamics in court this way. On a scale of -10 to +10, -10 means that the judge hates you, and +10 means that the judge loves you. As a father, I automatically started off in the negative range. And in general, the mother starts off in positive range, and the judge rubber stamps whatever the mother wants. So you have two jobs here. First, you want to play defense and avoid doing things that make you go more negative. Secondly, you want to go on offense and do things that make you go more positive. And you want to end up where you surpass the mother in terms of positive. In the last episode, 4A, we focused on defense. Now, let's focus on offense. Work the room. If you've been in court already, you're probably seeing that you have little to no chance at primary or 50-50 custody because of the way the judge and lawyers are speaking and behaving. And you're probably reacting with frustration, anger, or depression because the situation is overwhelming and hopeless. Does that sound familiar? Many of us fathers who went through family court have been there. I look at it as psychological warfare against the father, so that he just quits. But instead of you being on the defensive, fighting this psychological warfare, I want us to turn the tables and go on offense against the court. Here's a story. I didn't plan on this outcome. It happened by accident. So I want you to learn from my experience and do it on purpose. During year 3 of our custody trial process, there was a point where I had already testified about 8 times for 16 cumulative hours. After one of these court appearances, the mother and I were dismissed, and we both left the courthouse. Meanwhile, our 2 lawyers stayed behind to speak to the judge privately in the judge's office for a few minutes. When the 2 lawyers came back to the courtroom, the judge stayed in her office. The courtroom was empty, except for the 3 or 4 court clerks who were still there. These employees stopped to speak to our 2 lawyers, saying, "Hey, mother's lawyer, we know you well, and we like you. But your client, she is crazy. The father should have custody. We want the father to win." Let that sink in for a moment, guys. Your client, she is crazy. The father should have custody. We want the father to win. And then my lawyer called me to tell me this happened. The lesson here is you have to read the courtroom. The court employees are a good indicator on whether you're proving your case. They usually share a common opinion, so be nice to them and try to win them over as well. The judge and the employees probably have a relationship where they hang out together or talk in the hallways privately. When court clerks are making statements behind the scenes, like, "That father is a good father, he should have custody," those statements can sway the judge's opinion. Every organization has its own unique culture. The court employees listen to family stories all day, and they'll only remember those people that are memorable. And when these employees are alone with each other, they share their stories of their workplace, and you want them to have positive stories about you. It'll take time to plant those seeds and watch them grow, so start early. In my testimony, I was laser focused on convincing the judge I was a better parent. I was not thinking about any of the other employees in that courtroom, but as a byproduct of my testimony, I was also convincing these people that have some influence on the judge. I want you to do that intentionally, whereas I did it by accident. Here's another incident. After I heard the story about the court clerks telling our lawyers that the mother was crazy, I noticed a significant change in the court officer lady who usually stood next to me. Before that story, the officer was always gruff and serious, as if I was a domestic violence guy that needed to be kept in line. Her attitude was offensive to me, but I didn't focus on it. It was a distraction. But after that story about the mother being crazy, the officer stood next to me, and she would start whispering things to me that nobody in the courtroom could hear except me. When the mother said something crazy in court, I would physically react like this was crazy. The court officer could see it in my body language. And that court officer lady would whisper, "It's okay. Calm down. Just look at the judge. It's okay." It was like all of a sudden, she became a supporting character in my case. That was a huge turnaround. Work around the culture. Family court is the most depressing place on earth. That's the culture. And I found the employees to be miserable and standoffish. And in their culture, they generally assume the mother should have custody and the father must be the abuser. So I recognize it's not easy for you to go into this environment as a father and be jovial and happy with these people. But at the very least, I want you to be polite. Later on, when it's time for you to testify about actual facts and the best interests of your child, you want these employees to have an open mind because they think you're a nice guy. If you're rude to them throughout the proceedings, then they're more likely to be closed-minded when you testify in court. So this is an offensive strategy where I want you to plant these seeds intentionally as early as possible. Your goal is to dig yourself a place into the minds of these people and break them from the inside. I found stenographers to be regular people, nice people, who sit in court and type everything that everybody says for the transcripts. I was able to interact with them in a friendly way. Stenographers are different than everybody else in the courtroom. Why? After each court date, I would give them my phone number and email so that I could purchase the transcripts from them. I would meet them on my own without my lawyer. We would arrange for me to pick up the transcripts at their offices, which were on a different floor than the courtroom. It was an office for all the stenographers only, and not judges or court clerks. So during these encounters, I could talk to them and just be a regular person because we were not in a court session. And by just being regular, you can show these stenographers that you're not a monster like your child's mother makes you out to be. So if you have that opportunity, use that time to your advantage to get the stenographers to become supportive of you. Divide and conquer. But whatever you do, don't try to sell them on the merits of your case. Just engage in nice small talk. The court clerks are the 2 to 3 administrative people that sit on the side of the courtroom and handle the paperwork for the cases. These clerks might check you in or exchange paperwork with you, and you'll likely have only a little bit of interaction with them every time you go to court. There's no time for small talk with clerks in the courtroom, and it's not appropriate. So greet these people with a smile and say the standard, "Good morning, thank you, have a nice day." If you do that, you're likely to stand out compared to everybody else they meet. The court officers are the people with guns in the courtroom that maintain security. The officers deal with unruly people in court, and your job is to not be one of those unruly people. If the court clerks or officers are rude or abrupt with you, don't escalate the situation. Just make the interaction quick and walk away. These are often not polite people. Getting upset with them in order to make them be polite is not your primary goal, so don't get distracted. There's a huge difference between being assertive and aggressive. Assertiveness involves confidently expressing your opinions and beliefs while still being respectful to others. You're not allowing people to dominate you in conversation, but instead you're inserting your own opinions. Aggressiveness involves imposing your views on others in an angry or hostile way. In family court, it's important to not be aggressive, and it's equally important to be assertive. If you don't assert the facts of your case, then a judge who has a full case docket is probably just going to assume you have nothing to say, and that the judge should just rubber stamp the mother. So your offensive strategy in court is to assertively speak up when anybody, including the judge, is either lying or telling a partial truth that leads everyone else to a conclusion that goes against you. Most lawyers and judges in family court usually just use random cliches to explain a situation, and they think they sound intelligent. You need to assertively state what the actual facts are, and that you're equally capable of being the primary custodial parent of your kids. If you don't, then the judge is more likely to make decisions based on cliches or false statements. Only you can block the judge's ability to do that. Another tactic is that you want to be truthful about what you say. Not because lying is bad and honesty is good, but because the judge has to make a decision based on the credibility of the witnesses. If you know the mother is making false allegations, your secret weapon is to prove that you are the truthful one and she is lying. As an offensive tactic, you need to recognize that one of the best interest factors is lying and manipulating the court. If a parent is manipulating the outcome of the case by lying, it's one of the factors the judge has to consider in determining who is the better custodial parent. And if you want the judge to see her as the liar and not both of you as liars, then you have to be the truthful one. In court, act presidential. Act as the authority on what the truth is, since nobody else can do that job. Early on in my case, after being in court 1 or 2 times, the mother's lawyer lied in court, saying that I abused the mother so badly and she had so many bruises on her that she was too ashamed to go to work. I knew this was a complete and total fraud from beginning to end, and we spoke up against it. But the judge just nodded her head at the mother's lawyer and didn't ask any questions, and then continued to rubber stamp the mother for temporary custody. I knew that lying had to be detrimental to the mother's case, so my strategy was to make sure that I took advantage of all her lying by pointing it out and holding her up as a fraud during my final testimony. And at the same time, I knew that I had to be the exact opposite of that. I instructed my attorney early on that he was never to lie in court or make up nonsense. I made it clear to him that he was not allowed to undermine my strategy by lying in court himself. Unfortunately, there are countless stories of the mother lying and the courts ignoring her lying, and then the father loses custody. Your job is still to proactively highlight and prove the mother is lying. Nobody else will do that if you don't. Assume the judge will be lazy, and that you have to assertively make the judge pay attention and not make it easy for the judge to sweep the mother's perjury under the rug. And don't expect this will be a one-time exercise. You'll probably need to do this early and often, so make it part of your routine in court. Treat your custody trial like a job interview. Go on the offensive. You have to be personable and presidential. You have to prove that you can do the job better than the mother. In a contentious custody battle, when there are issues of domestic violence or drug use or mental health issues, then this becomes like a job interview where you have to prove that you're the better parent. And I think that one way to take this stressful situation and try to manage it in your head is to treat it like a job interview where you are the underdog. The next topic in this docuseries will be the best interests of the child, which you will eat, sleep, and breathe for the remainder of the trial. These might be the darkest days of your life, and I'm making these educational videos to help you navigate this nightmare. If you subscribe, you can get updates when I post more videos. Thank you for liking, subscribing, and sharing with your friends who are in a similar situation. If you like, subscribe, and share, it'll also help the YouTube algorithm get this message out to more fathers in our position.